What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Today, we're going to be talking about offensive lineman Tyler Smith. We're going to break him down in great detail. But before we do so, I think it's really important that we talk about the state of this Packers offensive line, because this is really a decent sized need for the Packers for the remainder of this offseason. Now, we know they have a lot of draft picks, and we know they've had a ton of success on days 2 and 3 of the draft in finding offensive linemen. Just last year, Josh Myers and Royce Newman, Elton Jenkins a couple years back, Bakhtiari was a 4th-round pick, John Runyon Jr. was a 6th-round pick. I mean, we can go TJ Langs and Josh Sittons, and you can go for as far back as you want, and they've had great success finding a variety of great offensive linemen throughout the draft, even undrafted guys. So it's not to say that they have to prioritize a offensive lineman in the first round, but I think it's really easy to sort of get drawn into this, false sense of security with the current state of the Packers offensive line. In your head, it's easy to think, all right, David Bakhtiari left tackle, John Runyon Jr. left guard, Josh Myers center, Royce Newman right guard, and eventually Elton Jenkins at right tackle. Sounds good. You've got Yosh Nijman still backing up. You've got Jake Hansen, who was a draft pick, a couple years back. Like you start feeling fairly decent about the state of that offensive line. And then you sort of realize, okay, but David Bakhtiari just missed all of last season and part of the season before and had major knee issues. And the hope is that he's 100% cleared and good to go and there's no issues ever again. But until he gets to camp and is practicing and is good and feels amazing, you have to have some, at least, even if it's like a 1% concern, right? There's still like that dark cloud that's going to hang over that's just like, well, what if, right? What if it doesn't come back all the way? Or what if even, he gets back and he's just not the same player? There's that dark cloud until he can come back and prove that he can play a full season and not have any issues. I think that's going to be the case. I would love for that to be the case, but I do think you have to have some level of trepidation, however minuscule that may be, that, all right, we're coming off a very serious injury and this did not heal the way anyone expected it to. All right, John Runyon Jr., really nice left guard. Josh Myers, you feel good about that at center. Royce Newman at right guard. All right, you're willing to give him some rookie forgiveness in his first year, right? 4th-round draft pick. You were expecting him to be more of a rotational player. He had to play a much bigger role than that, but wasn't great by any means. He looked like a, sort of, if he was your 5th starter, you're feeling okay with things, but would probably be somebody that you would like to upgrade. I do think he can make a very big step this season and become a guy that you can really trust. Remember, John Runyon Jr. wasn't ready 2 years ago and took a huge step in his second year. Royce Newman played far more than Runyon did in his rookie year and could easily make a second-year jump as well. And I think that's something that very easily could happen. Wouldn't doubt it at all, but he could just be the same guy and not take a step and be a player that, again, you're okay with as your 5th offensive lineman, but never really feeling great about. So there is some question mark there. Then you've got Elton Jenkins, who is not ready to play, and you're not sure exactly when he's going to come back. Probably starts the season on the PUP list, which then elevates Yosh to right tackle, who, as of right now, I would think that's the direction that they go in. So Yosh moves to right tackle, a position that he's never played before. And there is also a false sense of security for how Yosh played. I've said this before and I will say it again. There is a strong reason why Green Bay did the Billy Turner, switch and played him at left tackle and put Yosh on the bench in the playoff game. There was a feeling amongst Packer fans that Yosh filled in and was really, really good. And while I think he deserves a ton of credit for filling in admirably, he was not a starting offensive tackle. Now, he wasn't far off, and I do think he has the talent to develop into one, but he just wasn't there yet. And I do think now, if all of a sudden you're switching him to right tackle, I think you're looking at like a below average offensive tackle if he does have to start. So until Elton Jenkins gets back, you're now looking at Bakhtiari, Runyon, Myers. You feel pretty darn good about that left side, I would say. But now you've got Royce Newman and Yosh Nijman on the right side of your line, and that could get a little bit iffy. Now, Aaron Rodgers is going to get the ball out of his hands. That's his strong side. He's going to be able to see anything coming, but you would love to have a better offensive line than that. You'd love to be able to run the ball better than they did a season ago. The explosive runs dried up. They weren't as consistent running the football, which dried up some of the play action and the rollouts and the bootlegs. they needed a better offensive line and they just didn't have it. And all of a sudden, if, Elton Jenkins takes his time coming back and Royce Newman doesn't make a jump and, Yosh Nijman doesn't play well at right tackle, now you're in trouble. Even if things go well, right? Even if Yosh plays well and Royce plays well, things like that, your depth is still severely tested until Elton Jenkins gets back. All you have for depth at that point right now is Cole Van Landen and Jake Hansen. And there's no proof that either of those guys are ready to play. And you do have to at least consider the what if Elton Jenkins starts on the PUP list and David Bakhtiari's left knee is still having troubles and he can't start the season either. Now what? Now you're looking at Yosh at left tackle, John Runyon Jr. at left guard, Myers at center, probably Jake Hansen at right guard, and Royce Newman kicked to right tackle. Now you've got problems. And even if that five holds up, you've only got Cole Van Landen left on your roster. So I'm not meaning this to seem doom and gloom, and I'm very optimistic that they can go out there and Bakhtiari's going to be good, Running's going to be good, Myers is going to be good, Newman's going to take a jump, and Yosh can get by until Elton Jenkins can get back. Jenkins comes back, you probably put him in at right tackle, or if Yosh played great, you could put him in at right guard for Royce Newman as well. A lot of options there if things go correct. But you start having any issues, or David Bakhtiari doesn't make it back, Elton Jenkins has a David Bakhtiari-esque recovery and doesn't make it back this season, or whatever the case may be, and again, the state of your offensive line is a big question mark, and the depth would be severely tested. Now, the good news is that we are on April 22nd and not September whatever when they start the season. There's a lot of time left to build this offensive line, and they could certainly go the veteran route and add a couple veterans to this team still, well within the realm of possibility, and especially if they don't grab enough players early in the draft that they feel could fill in some of those positions or fill in a pinch, then you can guarantee they're going to attack free agency a little bit more and maybe, bring some guys in. But as of right now, I think the overall depth of the offensive line is extremely limited. And I do think that you probably want to bring in some legit competition for the right side of that offensive line so that it's going to either push the players that are there or maybe have somebody who's better than Yosh Nijman at right tackle. And also, the last thing I'll say in regards to this is, let's say you take a right tackle in the first round and they're really good. Now all of a sudden you get that versatility back with Elton Jenkins, right? Where if anyone goes down, he can play left tackle, left guard, center, right guard, right tackle. It doesn't matter. He can go anywhere. But if Yosh doesn't turn out and you don't draft a right tackle, like when Jenkins comes back, you have to play him at right tackle and you don't have really any flexibility. Lucas Patrick and his versatility is gone. Billy Turner and his versatility is gone. Jenkins is now pigeonholed at one spot and you can't move him around as much. So you lose a lot of that versatility to get your, best five guys out on the field. You may not have that anymore. So I do believe that bringing in a player who could potentially start, or at minimum a decent amount of depth and some players who could challenge for these positions, would really behoove Green Bay as they take a look at this draft and all the picks that they have. Now, you can guarantee that with all the picks they have, they're going to take a plethora of offensive linemen, maybe on day one, if not then day two, and certainly probably wouldn't even surprise me if 3, 4, maybe even 5 of them on day 3 of the draft. That's literally how I could see this playing out if they wanted to go in that direction. But there's no guarantee that, again, day 3 guys are going to be able to come in and contribute and provide depth. So they're going to have to figure something out in that regards. And again, free agency could still be in play. They could go and do a variety of different things. But the big thing I want to say here is that attacking this position in the draft, even early on, is well within the realm of possibility, which brings us to redshirt sophomore Tyler Smith out of the University of Tulsa. Offensive tackle at Tulsa, could play guard. We'll talk more about that. 6'4", 324, just turned 21 years old. So he just turned 21 years old this year. Very, very young, a lot of potential. We'll get into all of that. From an athletic standpoint, very athletic. Really the only thing that's below average for him is his height. 6'4.5" is below average for a tackle. If he moves inside, it becomes less of an issue. But 324 is in the 84th percentile, 25 reps on the bench in the 71st percentile. Vert was in the 52nd percentile. Broad jump was in the 65th percentile. 40-yard dash in the 92nd percentile. His 10-yard split in the 96th percentile. His short shuttle in the 76th percentile, and his three cone in the 60th percentile. Overall, an 87th percentile athlete as an offensive tackle, hitting a lot of those thresholds that Green Bay looks for. I'm sure they would love him a little bit taller, but I think with him hitting everything else, they would feel overall comfortable if they wanted to look in his direction. From a statistical standpoint, his numbers were fantastic. Per Pro Football Focus, he only allowed 16 pressures in 764 pass pro attempts. So 764 times to protect for his quarterback, only allowed 16 pressures and only 2 sacks. From a positional standpoint, I think he had a literal 2 snap game at left guard, and everything else was at left tackle. So just a left tackle through his college career, does not show any other versatility on tape that you will find. So as we're going through this, just remember he was always a left tackle in college. All right, let's jump through some of the positives. There are plenty of them. There are definitely things that he needs to work on, and we will go through all of it. So from a positive standpoint, he has fantastic upper body strength. He will throw players to the ground. He will be aggressive. He will get his hands on players and just maul them at times. He's a very good run blocker. He will drive players to the second level. He will drive them to the sideline. He plays through the whistle. His demeanor is phenomenal. Now, I guess I should rephrase that. His demeanor is intense and physical, and it's what you want out of an offensive lineman, right? He will get a little over aggressive with his demeanor and a little over nasty with his demeanor, which is something he can scale back a little bit. But overall, when you talk about an offensive lineman and wanting a little bit of nasty and wanting a little bit of mean and not wanting to, be friends with the guy across from you, that is Tyler Smith to a T. He will knock you out. He wants to punish you. He was formerly a defensive lineman, and he plays with that mentality. His demeanor and his strength and his physicality is all very evident on tape throughout any game that you want to watch. This is not a soft finesse player. This is a physical, dominant player when he wants to be. He is best in a phone booth, as you would probably imagine for that type of player. He doesn't necessarily want to play in space. Now, he's a really good athlete, so it's not that he can't play in space. We'll go why he hasn't exactly done well in that scenario in a bit, but if you get him in a phone booth and he can just use that nasty demeanor and that upper body strength to his advantage, he's going to win far more often than not. And right now, when you go and watch all of his tape through his 2 legit years in college, not including his redshirt freshman year, he wins a lot. And the thing that I'll say here is he's winning with just raw talent, raw athleticism. His technique is all over the place, which we are going to go over in the negatives ad nauseum, but he's winning a ton without technique. He's winning a ton with just the God-given ability to move and to overpower and to just annihilate players with his, again, God-given ability. So what happens if all of a sudden he gets technique? He's already winning without it. Now all of a sudden you figure out how to, get his feet set the right way and his arms in the right spot and his punch in the right spot, and you get him technique. Then what happens? Imagine his win rate if all of a sudden he starts playing the way that an offensive tackle is supposed to play. He's already winning. Now you figure would only win even more if he could figure out his technique. And again, we're going to go through all the things that are lacking in that in just a moment. One of the things that I love about David Bakhtiari, and to be clear here, I am not comparing Tyler Smith to David Bakhtiari, but David Bakhtiari has one specific area of his game that he struggles with, and that's with power rushers that can get into his body and bull rush him back into the quarterback. It'll happen almost every single game. You'll see it happen maybe a couple different times, maybe even 2 to 3 times. But what Bakhtiari is so incredibly good at is even in those scenarios, he's dominating the rest of the game, and then there's those 2 or 3 plays where he just gets bull rushed back into the quarterback. A lot of players in that situation, they will get bull rushed, and then the player's able to either just disengage them or throw them into the quarterback, or then dive over them or grab the quarterback with their arms. Bakhtiari has this natural ability to just sort of stay in between the the defensive player and his quarterback no matter what. Even as he's getting bull rush back, he's just kind of got that one last stand where he just kind of bends back and holds, and not holds in like a I'm going to hold you sort of way, but just holds up on that, like that final stand of like, all right, you pushed me back way further than I should ever be, but you are not getting past me, and I'm going to remain a buffer between you and the quarterback, and you're not going to be able to grab him. You're not going to be able to disengage from me. I still have you here, even though I'm not in the spot that I want to be, and even though Aaron Rodgers is still uncomfortable because you pushed me right back into him, you're still not getting past me, and I'm still going to make my one last stand. And Tyler Smith has that on tape on a few different occasions as well, where he will get bull rush back, and it's not great. You don't want to see that happen, but he makes that last stand and sort of re-anchors and figures it out at the last second so that he's not, again, getting beat or disengaged or whatever, so that his quarterback, ends up on the ground or with a sack or a fumble, etc. And that goes to show you why he only allowed 2 sacks in his career, is that even when he's beat, he has that sort of one last stand, similar to David Bakhtiari in that regards. He is a very clean mover. All of those, metrics that we talked about, the 10-yard split, 96th percentile, short shuttle, 76th percentile, 3 cones, 60th percentile, all of those show up. He can get to the second level with ease. He can pull with ease. I have no question about his movement ability whatsoever. And when he finds even better footwork, that should get even better at the next level. And then even when you beat him, and I kind of mentioned this with like the pass rushing, right? But like even in general, even when you win with your hands, or even when you win with leverage, and I'm saying you as like the defensive player, like no, even when you do everything right, he still might beat you. That's just the type of player that he is. Your hands are quicker, your hands are better, your hands are placed better, you're going to out leverage him, you're going to get the first step, you're going to do everything right as a defensive player, and you're going to feel like you're going to win that rep, and then he still beats you just with raw strength and movement ability, just because there's not many offensive linemen that can move and that have the strength and the power and the agility that Tyler Smith has. So even when he's like beat in all of the technical areas, you still may not beat him, which is again a really nice trait to have. And in the meantime, if he does do that stuff right, when he does get his footwork right, when he does get his hands inside of you, good night. It's over. You're not disengaging from him. And in fact, you're probably going to be lucky to just not be on the ground in that situation. Like that's how good he can be when his mechanics are correct. It's game over. You're not beating him. If he gets the first hand on you, or if he gets his hands inside and all of a sudden you're wrestling with a bear, it's over. He's going to beat you in that regard. So you had better hope that you do get those technical things to your advantage, because if you don't, he's going to beat you. He does struggle with speed off the edge, but I do think, again, that is something that he is going to be able to improve at the next level because, ultimately he has all of the intangibles. We talked about all the athleticism. He just needs a little bit more coaching, and he has all the things that you can't teach, right? He has the speed, the strength, the athleticism. It's just like all of those things that you can't teach at the NFL level, he has. That's why he's probably going to get drafted relatively high, because there will be offensive line coaches that just say, give me him and I will make him great. He's already good just based on his athletic ability, but if I can teach him, I will make him great. And the last thing I'll say in regards to a firm positive is that his upside is fantastic. Like, again, if all of a sudden he figures out his technique issues and he plays to the level that he's capable of playing, you're going to get a 10 to 15 year offensive tackle. Or even if he doesn't fit at offensive tackle, even if he ends up moving to guard, you're going to get a very good offensive lineman for a very good time, or for a very long time, The upside is tremendous. And I think some people might just say like he has to be a guard. I don't see it that way. I think he has enough raw athletic ability that you're going to have to reteach him everything anyway. So you might as well do it at tackle, because if he can do it at tackle, he's going to be really good. His height's not going to bother him. It's just not going to be an issue. He just has to get his technique down. And if he does, he can be a very, 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 very good tackle in this league. All right. Now on the flip side, plenty of negatives to discuss. 16 holding penalties, not in his career, just this last season. His arm placement and hand placement is a nightmare. Like almost every time he is an outside grabber. He wants to throw you to the ground. He's like, he's almost like overthinking, just like, I want to get you on the ground. I want to maul you. That's just not how you're going to win in the NFL. You have to win with technique. You're not just going to win on raw athleticism. He needs a full redo from the feet up on everything from a technique standpoint. And the 16 holding penalties just goes to show you how out of whack he is with his hand placement and how he's playing the position. As I mentioned, technique is the major issue here. Hand placement's out of whack, footwork's out of whack, his hands get way too far outside. Defenders will get their hands on him quicker. They'll have faster hands than him, and they know how to use them better than he knows how to use them. And there's one play on tape. I've never seen this from an offensive lineman. He just leans into the guy. He's not even using his hands. He basically just I'm going to just shoulder jab you. And then finally he got his hands up and he still won the rep because that's just who he is. But that's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about a couple tweaks with his technique. He needs a full makeover from a technique standpoint. And that leaves him, by the way, very susceptible in pass pro. And you might say, Andy, he allowed 16 pressures and 2 sacks. What the heck do you mean? NFL players will take advantage of all of those weaknesses. A TJ Watt is going to eat that type of player up. Preston Smith is going to eat that player up. Rashawn Gary is going to get his hands inside and drive him right back into the quarterback. If you don't play with technique in the NFL, I don't care. Maybe Walter Jones could have got away with it. But for the most part, if you don't have that technique, you're just not going to win. And it's going to have to be something that he completely redoes, or he's going to be very susceptible to quick pressure off the edge, to bull rushes, to all of it. Because again, there's nothing that you can point to and be like, all right, he does that very well. It all needs a makeover. Now, height is not ideal, but his wingspan is fine. He's in the 85th percentile for wingspan. His arm length is good enough. I don't have concerns about his height. You're not an inch taller? What is an inch taller going to do? If anything, he should be able to have a little bit better leverage. I'm not concerned about his height, but I know it will get brought up. He will get off balance at times. He has to do a better job. Again, that's footwork will help that a lot, and reworking his footwork will help that, but he will get off balance and he will get knocked down from time to time. He's got to do a better job in general of staying up on his feet. He needs a lot of work on blitz pickups, twists, stunts. If I were a defensive coordinator, I would, if I see him week 1 starting at tackle, we are going to blitz that side. We are going to twist and stunt. We are just going to throw the kitchen sink at him, because I don't feel like, unless he gets a lot of work done in the offseason, that he's just going to consistently be able to pick all those up. His vision needs to be better on it, and he needs to be aware of everything going on. He jumps to conclusions a little bit and will, again, lose vision on everything that's going on. He just needs to be better at it all the way around. He can, as I mentioned earlier, get a bit too nasty at times and play out of control. And he's a very undisciplined player from, again, technique, from wanting to just maul people out of the screen. I love the demeanor, but you've got to play with technique and smarts first. And then once you master that, then you can start doing the fun stuff. But you got to play it the right way. And just right now, he's a very undisciplined player. At one point early in his college career, he had escalated up to 350 pounds. It seems like his weight's in a really good spot. 324 doesn't seem like it's an issue right now, but if all of a sudden he gets to 350, all of that raw athleticism and his quickness probably goes out the window, which would be a major issue. As mentioned, he may end up needing to play guard in the NFL, which if you're, again, your value, and I know Mike Wall will disagree with me on this, but your value in the first round or being a top pick is more at tackle than it is at guard. We're seeing more and more guards get drafted earlier, but again, you probably would ideally like him playing left tackle or at least right tackle. And if all of a sudden he has to kick into guard, it might just be, a little bit less of an ROI on your investment. And again, he hasn't shown any positional versatility in college. He's only played left tackle. And the biggest thing that I will say there is he's had 2+ years of left. Now, he's only played offensive line in his entire life for 5 years. So there's a ton of growth potential here, right? He is young. He is raw. He is massively skilled. He just needs the technique work. But he played 2+ years at left tackle, didn't come close to mastering that position. So now if you want him to be versatile, but you're going to try him at guard or right tackle, all right, you played him at 2.5 years at left tackle and he didn't come close to mastering that position and figuring that out. You're going to throw more at him now? That does not seem like a recipe for success. So you wonder if just, how versatile is he going to be able to be? He might have to be at left tackle until he can at least figure that out. Or again, I guess if you're starting from scratch, maybe you can move him to guard or put him at right tackle and just say, we're going to start you over entirely and we're going to put you in a new position and give you new things to work on. I guess that maybe could work, but again, I'm not sure the level of versatility he would have, at least early in his career. Now, from a Packers standpoint, I do think you get this player with Adam Stenavich and Luke Butkus, and I know Stenavich is an offensive coordinator, but trust me, I believe he's going to be very involved with offensive linemen still. You get this type of player with Stenavich and Butkus, man, they have made a lot better players out of a lot worse talent. Like, if I could tell you, like right now, like if I were a Tyler Smith fan or his agent, and I would be like, where do you want to end up? You want to end up in Green Bay. Stenavich and Butkus will make him the best possible player he can be, in my opinion. So I do think that they can take this incredibly skilled and talented player and bring out the best in him, because they haven't shown me anything otherwise at this point from what they've done from a coaching standpoint. So I love those two matched up together. I do think he would have some potential to compete at right tackle with Yash right away if that ends up having to be the competition. But I do wonder, you're all in for the next couple seasons. Is this really the 21-year-old project that you want to take on? Somebody that needs a complete makeover technique-wise, who may take 2 years to be ready, and you have needs right now. You're not sure where David Bakhtiari's injury status is. Elton Jenkins isn't going to be ready. Yash may have to switch sides. Like, you have immediate needs to have players be ready to play right now. And this 21-year-old who needs a ton of work, like the technique is a mess. Is that the pet project that you want at this point in the Packers development process? I will say he's a ultimate traits versus tape player. The traits are there in spades. He has everything that you would want. I love the mix up or the match with Stenavich and Butkus. I love all of that. I think he could compete just based on raw talent. And I think it would be interesting. But I just wonder if this is the right player at the right time. If all of a sudden, listen, if you, with your first 3 picks, you get your edge rusher and your wide receiver and maybe a safety or another wide receiver, and you feel good about 3 players in your first 3 picks that can come in and play right away and help your team, and all of a sudden you get to your second round pick and he's still chilling there, I could see taking the upside and being like, all right, we're going to take a shot at it. I wouldn't hate it. I would understand that. But anything other than that late second round pick, I would have, if anything earlier than that, I would have, I think would be a bit of a reach based on where Green Bay's at from an organizational standpoint and needing to win over these next couple years and in win now mentality at the moment. I do compare him a little bit to Josh Jones, not the safety, the offensive lineman out of Houston a couple years ago. I liked Jones's tape better than I did, with Tyler Smith. Tyler Smith has much better upside. There were a lot of people that thought Jones would go in the late first, early second. He ended up going, I think, mid to late third round, if I remember correctly, and has not worked out in Arizona yet. Now, again, Smith has better upside, was a little bit bigger, a little bit more physical, but again, non-power conference. He played at Houston, Josh Jones. Tyler Smith plays at Tulsa. And again, I think there's going to be a big learning curve. And maybe Josh Jones puts it together in year 3, year 4 for Arizona. We'll have to wait and see. But I just don't think Tyler Smith's going to come in and be this really super functional player from day one, because he needs a ton of work and the technique needs a full rebuild from the ground up. That's going to do it for me today. Thank you so much for joining me. I always appreciate you. Be right back here tomorrow with an all new episode. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.